Alrighty, welcome back everyone for another episode. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the holidays. Not quite at New Year's yet, but today we have a little gift for those that celebrate Christmas. Today I'm joined by Dr. Matt Horwitz, who many of you might know him. He's kind of the editorial-in-chief, CEO. I don't really know. He's head of a synthesis workshop for organic chemistry, and we'll definitely be talking about that. But he's also works at Eurofins, right? For Eurofins Villapharma over in Spain, which is kind of interesting because I believe you grew up in the States, but now you're over in Spain working. But I was kind of looking at you like your CV. You kind of really were like well traveled for doing your chemistry. You're kind of all over the place, which is really really fascinating to see. I guess before we definitely want to start with a little bit of your background. So I know you did your undergrad at Columbia, so I'm not sure if you're kind of from the New York area, but I kind of let you take a little reins of that and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm actually from North Carolina originally. Yeah, that's true. I went to Columbia for undergrad, and I was doing originally computational chemistry with a professor there called Charles Doubleday. But yeah, I did get exposed to a number of other professors, including Sam Danishevsky, who was an organic chemistry teacher when I was there. And I realized at some point that experimental synthetic organic chemistry was kind of where I wanted to go with further studies and with the Ph.D. So that was kind of the direction I ended up taking. And there were some other professors there. Scott Snyder was there when I was doing the undergrad, and he was doing a total synthesis course, and I kind of realized that this is something that for me was super exciting, and I realized that's kind of the direction I wanted to go in my career a little bit.
Yeah. So this is at Columbia or at when you did a PhD at UNC?
Yeah. When I came to UNC, then I guess there were a few different options on the table for like synthetic organic chemistry. A lot of the professors who were there when I started are still there, so there are a lot of the same options on the table for grad students today. But these include people that are doing kind of organometallic chemistry, that are doing CH activation, that are doing photochemistry, and some people, like in the group where I did the PhD with Jeff Johnson, that are doing a bit of everything. And I've come to see that there's some groups that are doing more specialist work and that say, my specialty is going to be this particular area of synthetic organic chemistry, and we're just going to focus on training people in this specific area. And those people become super useful for teaching the community about this specific sub area as deeply as they can. But then there are these other people who are able to kind of combine areas and say, I am going to use a little bit of this type of catalysis, and I'm going to be doing some asymmetric chemistry, and I'm going to be doing this, that, and the other, and I'm going to use them together to do some bigger task, like the total synthesis of a complex target, for example. So that ended up being more the character of like my doctoral training was the jack of all trades instead of the specialist.
I was going to say during your PhD, I mean, you definitely, like I said, you're kind of well traveled too. I mean, I know you're while you're doing total synthesis and organic catalysis for Professor Jeff Johnson at UNC, but you're also doing Professor Takashi. See, my Japanese is not.
It's fine.
Ooi at Nagoya University, but
exactly.
Xiaoming Feng at Sichuan University. Hopefully, I pronounced this correctly.
No, it's fine. I for sure won't say it that much better. Yeah, that's true. I found out there's this really cool fellowship. I don't know if it still exists. I hope so. That's called EAPSI, or East Asian Pacific Summer Institute. That's an NSF-funded initiative in the United States for graduate students in the U.S. to go to one of, I think it's like 5 or 7 different Asian countries in East Asia. And you can go there and work for a summer for a couple months with full NSF funding. So if you're listening to this and you're a grad student, I definitely encourage you to check this out because it's a really cool opportunity to get exposed to a completely different lab environment and possibly also a completely different chemistry, or also kind of form a collaboration. In my case, I ended up going to China with this because I realized that not that many Americans were going to China, and I thought, let's just see how this is. Because it's no secret that there are stereotypes in the community, and there are.
Yeah, of course.
I think that it benefits us to kind of be able to see what is on the other side of the pond. and to see how are things working in these labs, and what is life like for a Chinese graduate student, or for a graduate student in Japan. In the case of Japan, I had the chance to work in the lab of Takashi Ooi, which is also a very foundational experience, because this is another group which is more a group of specialists in organocatalysis that work on a number of different chiral organocatalysts. And when I realized then that if you're someone who is trying to become a jack of all trades, then you benefit from talking to a lot of different specialists, and working with them and gaining everything that you can from your interaction and your overlap with the specialists, because then it's kind of that you're able to absorb as much experience and knowledge as you can from them when you realize all the different nuances of their chemistry, that you might not learn just from a superficial interaction. So this is a little bit go on.
I was saying that's really fascinating because I mean, like you mentioned, I really hope that fellowship does still exist. That'd be really cool to take a look at that offline. Take a look and see what's out there. But I mean, you're right. With the stereotypes, it definitely is true. I know I have a Chinese postdoc in my group, but also there's another Chinese postdoc who's right down the hall from us, and we were like out to lunch one time. And we were just talking about, and he was like, a lot of Chinese postdocs come over to the United States, but are there ever do you guys have Americans that go over to China? He says no, it's never no, we never really see Americans. In China, I don't know if that was the same for any European students that go over to China, but no, you generally don't really see that. I don't know why that is, honestly. I mean, I don't really know. I don't really know why that is. I guess what's also interesting though is that a lot of Americans go to Japan though, so I don't I know. I mean, I have a friend who actually just went over to Japan to do his postdoc, so I'm not really sure what it is, and perhaps it's just. I don't know. People are just interested in going to, Europe and Japan over China. Maybe it's just that simple. I have no idea, but
I'm not sure. I mean, definitely at the faculty level, China is recruiting really heavily for international faculty members. So I think that China does look for Europe and the U.S. very heavily to try and recruit for their university faculty. There was one that I encountered when I was in Sichuan University, but it's overwhelmingly rare to find another foreigner, let alone another American, in Chinese universities. That's for sure. Yeah.
How did you stumble across the fellowship? Was it kind of word of mouth, or how did you find out about it?
There were, I think, 2 other graduate students in my group who had done that postdoc. Both of them had gone to Japan, and through this I realized that these students were becoming kind of much more well-versed in a specific subtopic. One of them got very well-versed in organocatalysis, and the other one got very well-versed in asymmetric transition metal chemistry. And I saw through their experiences that was something that was worth doing. And then I thought that, okay, you could just repeat and do the same thing. You could try and go to another Japanese group, or you could try something new. And I thought, let's try something new. Yeah.
Just on I guess on your background a little bit more, just kind of dive a little bit deeper into it. So, you grew up at UNC, or you grew up in North Carolina.
Yeah, that's true.
I grew up in UNC. Were you from kind of the Charlotte area or Raleigh?
I'm from Western North Carolina, closer to Asheville.
Okay.
But,
Asheville, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Asheville, North Carolina is really popping up with country music now. It's a very desirable place to go and be.
Yeah, it's a really nice city.
So kind of coming up through junior high and high school, was chemistry or maybe STEM beyond kind of something you've always been interested in, or how did that kind of begin?
I guess, I had a really influential high school chemistry teacher that was very strong. I guess you see a lot of times that there's an influential teacher in one specific topic and the student gets interested and follows through. In my case, then I had an influential chemistry teacher in high school. And it's not really a secret, though, that high school chemistry is so disconnected from mainstream organic chemistry that kind of general chemistry and organic chemistry are almost 2 completely different topics. And it's almost a coincidence that a lot of the people who say I'm interested in chemistry end up falling into this category of organic chemistry, where it it has a completely different feel, I think, and maybe even we lose some opportunities with people who would eventually become organic chemists because they're weeded out in a way by some of the ways that they see general chemistry as being too mathematical in nature or something. But then they get to the point of seeing organic chemistry and they feel like it's this more visual sort of game or a puzzle, and it feels like something that's completely different than general chemistry. But yeah, in any case, for sure, it helps to have influential teachers that have a very positive impact and have a positive first experience to get you in the right direction.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about it in a while, but I guess the topic that always kind of gets brought up is kind of the, restructuring of either high school or like chemistry. I haven't taken a look at the curriculum, but yeah, it doesn't really make sense to me why. I mean, I don't know. It couldn't be structured better, or just I don't know. I don't really know what it is, but or structure it in a way to kind of keep students.
Yeah,
because it kind of is definitely like mathematically heavy at first.
Yeah, it feels like the parts of general chemistry from high school that I remember are like how to convert grams of something into grams of starting material into theoretical grams of product. And This is just like an exercise in making unit conversions, which is the least interesting. It is useful for sure, but it's probably the least interesting part, and it doesn't. I don't know. Maybe get the many students interested, because how many students would think, "Oh, that's great. I want to be doing unit conversions when I grow up."
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So, yeah, I don't know.
And they do spend an awful amount of time, like kind of with the unit conversion stuff. It's kind of like. Now that you mentioned it, that actually reminds me of that.
Yeah. There's also this other thing that comes up in general organic chemistry where I think that they always say in problems like, oh, this amount of like elemental analysis was done and this amount of carbon was found. It's like, no one ever does that ever. Why does it have to be such a hypothetical example of a type of analysis that no one does?
I was gonna say that they're even like. They're kind of phasing out elemental analysis now for like structural characterization. Like no one even does that anymore. Like, yeah, I don't know. I'd love to sit down with someone. This actually could be a great future episode. Sit down with someone who like is actually trying to restructure like either high school or even general chemistry, like first year of college.
Yeah,
that'd be a pretty fun conversation, I think. But in any case, so you're doing, you had a fondness for chemistry. Junior high school. But then going to Columbia, there's something that kind of drew you to go to Columbia, because I think Columbia is in New York City. Like it's actually
it is. Yeah, it is. It's on the Upper West Side of Manhattan.
Upper West Side.
Yeah, this is something quite different coming from a small town. If you come from a small town, then going to a big city can feel like it's a big, exciting change. And when you're growing up, especially, you want a lot of new experiences, and this is something that's very exciting for a young person to be exposed to. So, yeah, that's definitely an interesting aspect.
I was gonna say like Asheville is not like the smallest town ever. I mean, but New York City, it doesn't really get much bigger than New York City though. So it is kind of, you definitely wanted to, I presume you definitely like wanted to change up, but, when you first arrived in New York, I don't know if you had been there before, but when you first arrived to New York, what was kind of like your general feeling?
I mean, I had been there as a tourist before, but if you go there and you're living there, then of course it's very overwhelming and you have to remain focused on the things that you're there for, like studying. And because there are a lot of different things in terms of the things you can see and, the music that's available and the museums and, the types of nightlife and the things you can do during the day as well. And also in terms of the courses that you can pursue in a larger university, then, yeah, there are lots of different directions you can get pulled in. And you can say, maybe I came here for this, but maybe I'm interested in that. And this normally happens, I guess, a lot of different times at the university level when you're going through your courses and you're thinking, I thought I came here because I thought that I was interested in chemistry, but then you have these other introductory experiences in different types of subjects, and then you can start to get pulled in those directions and realize that, okay, maybe it wasn't for me, maybe this is for me. And in any case, yeah, I guess I entered thinking I wanted to be a medical doctor, and then I think reaching organic chemistry and going through that, I realized that, okay, I thought that this is just what you have to do in order to become a medical doctor. But then as I started to learn more about it, I thought that actually this is actually this is what I really want to focus on. And that was surprising, but it ended up being a good decision. And it's one I've been happy with so far.
For sure. It definitely, you were one of the ones that we converted from medical doctor to organic chemistry. It is pretty crazy how many of those are there.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. So, then coming, I guess, towards the end of your undergrad, like we mentioned before, you did your doctorate study at UNC. Now, was that kind of an easy decision? I mean, was kind of graduate school just felt natural to go and pursue, or was it a more difficult choice?
I think at some point I had been super ambitious and thought I want to do an MD PhD, but then at some point I realized that what I really wanted to do was try and become a chemistry professor. So I thought I should really just try and get the organic chemistry PhD. And then I think once I had made that decision, then it was mostly down to a choice of what the options were. And I looked around, and I think that I made 10 applications for graduate schools, and I got into one. So I don't know if that was a consequence of me not having done research in the right area. Maybe if I had done research in the area that I was going to do the PhD in, it would have been more successful. But in the end, I got incredibly lucky because I know there are people that go through several rounds and to get into the PhD. But yeah, I don't know what would have happened if I had not gotten into UNC. But I did get the chance, so yeah, it was lucky.
Yeah, bit lucky, but sometimes we need a little bit of luck. And look at you now. It's like it worked out for the best. So
yeah.
Everyone needs a little bit of that in their life. So
yeah, that's true.
But yeah, so all right. So now you're at UNC Chapel Hill, doing total synthesis, working with Professor Jeff Janssen. Now, was it kind of an easy decision to join his group, or because there's a lot of great faculty there?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. There are several others, and it wasn't that easy because Professor David Savage, who was also on this podcast before, is really an incredible personality, and also had really a lot of exciting research. Eric Alexanian was doing CH activation, and still is, and is also a really interesting person and a great lines of research going on. Which have made it to the highest levels in science in the last couple of years. Simon Meek was also doing transition metal catalysis and still is. And yeah, it's also a little bit of a choice when you enter the PhD about whether you're going to go for someone who is more at the beginning of their career or more already established. And I guess I wanted to choose someone who was already established a little bit because I had no synthetic organic chemistry research experience, which is a frightening position to be in as a first-year graduate student, because you're like, okay, I'm going to become an expert in something that I know nothing about experimentally. So to do that, I guess you want to at least have some type of structure and know that the professor who is going to be mentoring you has basically done this before, 20 to 30 times, and knows how to push the people through the program a little bit. So
yeah.
Of course, you can't start just really doing total synthesis at the beginning of a PhD. This is kind of not a possibility, especially if you have no synthetic organic chemistry. It's not like, okay, no research experience in organic chemistry. It's not like, okay, I go make a steroid now and I'm going to try and publish in JACS. It's impossible. So I started working on methodologies. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you come from a kind of a computational chemistry background, and you kind of mentioned that wasn't really for you, but then to switch into total synthesis was that kind of feel, well, organic catalysis and total synthesis, which what kind of what sticks out even nowadays, because now you're head scale up at Eurofins, what kind of sticks out about kind of very much hands-on organic synthesis that you love so much?
Yeah, having some experiences in reading a lot about total synthesis as an undergrad, even without the research experience, you can feel the inspiration for what the chemists are trying to achieve when they're doing total synthesis of complex molecules. And a lot of different stories I would read about total synthesis in journals, I would get very inspired by these stories and see like, okay, one day I want to be someone who can write one of these stories. And in the end, I was not, but I tried. And about organocatalysis, this is something which I got into by accident, but I had met a couple of different graduate students that had given me some knowledge about this during my first couple of years of the Ph.D. And I think the first successful project that I was on was in organocatalysis, and then I started to learn a little bit more. And you take kind of one step away, and you learn about a new type of catalyst, and another step away, and you learn about another type of catalyst, and you try and become an expert in a sub area. And then if you want, during subsequent research experiences, you can try and expand that kind of further. This ended up being a little bit what I did during the PhD. For example, I was focused on a type of organocatalysts that are Bronsted superbase organocatalysts. And after this, then I was focused on like photo organocatalysts, and during one of the postdocs, and then another postdoc I did was focused on another type of hydrogen bond donor catalyst, this for phase transfer. But you can kind of learn about different catalysts from different specialist groups or from people that have worked in specialist groups, and then kind of incorporate that into developing your own chemistry ideas a little bit. So this is a little bit what I was thinking about in the first couple of years of the PhD.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned earlier that becoming a professor was something you really had really become interested in. So, I assume that naturally after completing your PhD, you done your first postdoc with Professor Paolo Melchiorre. Hopefully I pronounced that right, but I was at ICIQ in Catalonia. Yeah. Was that, again, I assume that was kind of a natural next step, right, to continue. I mean, it seems like you really like the research part of it anyway, so I don't know if that kind of felt like a next natural step, but...
I mean, I realized that in order to become a professor, then you should really try to become like a T-shaped person. So you have to have this basis in something, and then you have to also grow in another direction during the postdoc. And then maybe you have to go in a third direction to differentiate yourself further from the other candidates for R1 research positions. So I guess after the PhD, then I was thinking about how to do something that I hadn't done before, because I realized that I would have to make myself uncomfortable again and step into an area where I didn't know anything, and that ended up being photochemistry. So I looked at some professors in the U.S., but then I ultimately realized I wanted something that was really different, and I realized that there were not a lot of Americans that are going to Europe for a postdoc, so this would be something unique if I came back to the U.S., and it would also be something unique in Europe to be someone who came from the U.S. And then, so I was working in photochemistry with Paolo Melchiorre at ICIQ, and then I ended up doing another postdoc in Oxford with Gouverneur. And this is also about organocatalysis, but each time you're kind of developing a different sub area a little bit. Since she has a more specific focus on fluorination chemistry, so any organocatalysis that's going on there is mostly going to be focused on fluorination. But it's a bit of another sub area.
Yeah. But, so what were you working on? I guess when you had moved to Oxford with Gouverneur, what were you working on there at the University of Oxford?
There, I worked on two different things. One is regioselective fluorination. And the other is asymmetric azidation with sodium azide. So I guess one of the main research lines that's going on in that group now is about using cheap commercial salts as sources for asymmetric nucleophiles, basically. Because there are a lot of different ways to introduce a nucleophile asymmetrically. Like one of the most famous ones in organocatalysis is the not to make this too literature heavy for a podcast, but
that's okay. That's all right.
But one of the most well established ways of introducing a nucleophile with organocatalysis now are the methods of Jacobson, where you use a chiral hydrogen bond donor to ion pair a nucleophile and electrophile together in 3D, and it controls the way that the nucleophile is added to the electrophile. But in general, the methods of Gouverneur are a bit more focused on creating a three-dimensional guest that can hold a nucleophile in place in a specific way such that it can engage in asymmetric reactions, and you can use alkaline metal fluoride salts like potassium fluoride or cesium fluoride in asymmetric fluorination reactions. That's
really cool.
The chemistry of it. Yeah.
I was gonna say that's really cool. So you were a part of the asymmetric fluorination then, or
I was not the first person. But I was part of the people who took advantage of it once it was established. But
that's really cool.
I think this is something that I often see coming up again and again in the career that you. I don't think I would ever consider myself someone that like established something completely new, but I was always someone that was able to take advantage of something someone else had discovered a little bit and push it forward in new applications. But then this is in the end what everyone is doing, and the idea that something is completely new is a bit an illusion. Because even the people who you could say like, oh, these people really discovered it. It's like, yeah, but that actually came from somewhere, didn't it? I mean,
right. I was gonna say there's like a running joke in kind of our department. It's like nothing's new. You can find something from like an old Russian or German journal from like the 1920s. Like surely it's been done before. You know, one thing that comes to mind is like Professor Philbert, and he mentions this in one of his seminars, but it's like he's doing reductive decarboxylation to a couple carboxylic acids, but it makes it very clear that this reaction has been known since like the 1850s, known as the Colby reaction. So it's like everything's pretty much been tried and done before. So
it feels that way sometimes. But then sometimes you see chemistry that is so mind blowing. Like probably the thing that comes to mind from the last couple of years has been like chemistry of Mark Levin. It's like. The stuff you could have done like using reagents from like 20 or 30 years ago, but just no one did. And it's incredible to see that there's still new transformations coming out, that it feels like it didn't require some new technological advance. It didn't require ball milling. It didn't require some new thing. But it still seems that there are a lot of hidden new ideas that are possible.
Yeah, all the skeletal editing stuff is. I mean, I think that's really fascinating because it just, I mean, even like I know like his animations, like when I see it, like
that's
pull up on the Twitter timeline, I'm like, oh wow, like that looks really cool, and like something as simple as that, like kind of gets the whole community, enlightens us a bit. I don't know what the right word is, but I think it's like really really fascinating. Yeah,
it's a good way of showing what you did, because I think the community in general, unfortunately, it's getting sometimes lazy. And where sometimes it's like it is too much work to read the full paper. It used to be too much work to read all the letters and all the words. Now sometimes it's too much work to see the figures, and we have to have an animation on Twitter to explain it to us somehow.
Yeah. Complete side note: why does Ankavante not have like figures when I like go through? I'm like, is that? I don't know if you know the answer to that, but
I don't have the answer. I guess they should.
It's a crime.
I don't know if it's a crime, but it's an inconvenience that is a competitive disadvantage, I would say, in the publishing world.
Anyways, so after you gone to University of Oxford, then you did another postdoc, I think.
Actually, I ended the postdocs at Oxford. I did two.
You did, okay.
Yeah.
But after that, you'd become a senior scientist at Janssen Pharmaceutical Company. So I guess if you don't mind me asking, we mentioned before you'd really want to become an R1 research professor, but, you took a pharmaceutical job. Go
on.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead. Hold on, yeah.
That's fine. I came on as just entry-level scientist at Janssen from Oxford, and I decided at some point during the pandemic, I decided a little bit during the pandemic to change course, because I think I had tried during and before the pandemic around 40 to 45 times to become a professor in different places. I don't know what a normal number is for number of attempts, but at some point it wasn't that I gave up. I think that I changed my mentality, and I realized that I was trying for something that I didn't actually want, that I had set my mind on a long time ago, and that I think that what I was trying to do during a second postdoc in a second European country after about 8 years. 8 years after I'd set this goal, was just to get to the point that that my past self had wanted me to arrive at. But then I realized, having arrived at this point 8 years later, with I don't know how many papers under my belt, and I thought I would never get one, that I didn't want to be doing this anymore. That the papers were not as important as I thought they were, and that what was important was the impact. And if you can have the impact through papers, then that's great. But I think that it turns out that in a lot of cases, then papers are often about salesmanship more than about true impact, unfortunately. Yeah. And I felt that true impact would come in industry. And it could be in pharma, or it could be in agro, or in fine chemicals, or even in fragrances. Or, but I felt that that impact would come with coming to industry and putting the concerns more on the customer or the patient than on the CV and on the publication.
Sure.
And
thank you for sharing that. Because I think, thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of especially younger grad students probably, I'm sure there's a lot of them kind of in the same boat, where it's like they have this dream of becoming a professor, and the reality is it is extremely competitive, and you need to be super marketable. Like, you can have really transformative chemistry, but you have to also you have to play the game a little bit to kind of get in those positions, and it can feel like you're kind of losing touch with what's actually kind of important, I guess. With like you mentioned, like kind of the impact. So I definitely hear you there. So you're at Janssen Pharmaceutical, and I think that was in Belgium, I believe, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Kind of working there for a little while, but eventually though, you switched over to Eurofins, but you're also now kind of the advisory board for synthesis, but also you play a role in tetrahedron letters. So I don't know if you want to tell us about your roles for synthesis and tetrahedron letters, journals.
Yeah, I think the role with synthesis came about by starting to collaborate with them on some outreach. So I had started to collaborate with Team of Chemistry through Synthesis Workshop, organic chemistry video podcast I run, and which of course you're on the editorial board for, and through collaborating with Team of Chemistry, then I grew to know the people on the other side of that a little bit, and eventually I became a little bit more integrated with them, and joined the advisory board for synthesis. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, with tetrahedron letter, at some point they were looking for an early career advisory board, which is a good opportunity for early professors or early people in industry, people at the early stage of their career in industry, to kind of remain engaged in the editorial process of journals and still remain connected to the academic community a little bit. Mm. So that was a little bit what I was thinking when I got involved with those. With Janssen Pharmaceuticals, then I was working in two different positions. I was first working in a position called Discovery Process Chemistry Scientist. And discovery process research is a bit between medicinal chemistry and process chemistry, as I guess the name suggests. And it means that on one hand, you're supporting structure-activity relationship interrogation. So you're trying to give medicinal chemists the tools, the reactions that they need in order to reach as much SAR space as they can as quickly as possible and find the best drug as quickly as possible. But on the other hand, you're also trying to support early scale-ups up to a few hundred grams. And I realized that that's actually not something that's being done in pharma by the chemists in pharma, which means that I think we have this idea that the chemists in pharma are kind of are doing all the hard work of pushing all the compounds through that need to be pushed through for toxicity batches, or for developability studies, or for crystallization studies, or solid state studies. But the truth is that it's actually a collaboration between the pharma industry and contract research entities in different places, normally outside the country where the pharma is located, that are pushing these programs forward together. And this is a little bit a hidden element from the outside, because it's not until you really arrive on the inside of a big pharma company that you realize that okay, so we're actually kind of pulling the strings on a couple of different other contract research organizations and using those external resources to advance our own programs in that way. So a lot of the innovation that we see happening in drug pipelines is happening at pharma, even if remotely in some cases. But the execution is happening in a lot of cases in the contract research organization. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm not really familiar with kind of the workflow of, let's say, pharmaceutical companies. Perhaps maybe you could tell us a little bit about that a little bit. So, like I mentioned, you're head of scale up at Eurofins. Perhaps I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about, well, one, your role, but also, what sort of pharmaceutical compounds are you guys targeting? Or because that's always a question I always find personally interesting, because there really are. There's got to be millions of different compounds you could target. So, like, what what kind of sticks out for your company in particular?
Yeah, for sure. So in my current role, I run a kilo lab at Eurofins Villapharma, and we're operating between normally 10 grams and a kilo of product that we're trying to deliver. And the product in this case could be something that's either a building block or an API, an active pharmaceutical ingredient. And when we're delivering these, it's in a non-GMP manifold, which means that you're not compliant to GMP guidelines, of course, and this places you in a specific phase of drug development, meaning that you can't be delivering non-GMP batches to the clinic.
Right.
You're in preclinical work, or you're developing work, or you're developing processes for clinical manufacturers, for GMP manufacturers. So that means that...
Just really quickly, so GMP stands for good manufacturing processes. That's for...
Good manufacturing practice, yes.
Yeah. Yep.
So exactly. So this means that if you're running a scale-up lab in a non-GMP CRO and a contract research organization, sorry for all the acronyms, but I promise it's actually far fewer acronyms than there are in big pharma. But in any case, if you're working in non-GMP, then this means you could be supporting discovery groups, discovery process groups, and groups like this, everything that comes before what they would call the declaration of a new molecular entity, which is kind of the point where you're going to start preparing for clinical trials. And even once you're preparing for clinical trials, once you're preparing the clinical supply, you could still be doing work in a non-GMP facility to understand what routes you're going to be using for the GMP manufacturing campaigns, if that makes sense. So you could say, what molecules are we making is a question that depends on the client. So there could be clients from a wide number of therapeutical areas, and they're clients from all different pharmaceutical companies that will come to us and say, either I want this and I know how to make it. And this normally comes from either literature, maybe a JMedChem paper, or a paper from whatever medical, whatever medchem article they're using as their lead series. Mm-hmm. Or they will say, I want this and I don't know how to make it, and no one does so far. These are kind of the two main possibilities for triggering a scale up. And depending on these two sort of situations, you can say either we'll assign this into what was called a fee-for-service workflow, or a FTE, or full-time equivalent workflow. So the difference between between working in FFS, so fee-for-service, or FTE, full-time equivalent, is the difference between knowing exactly how to reach the product and not knowing exactly how to reach the product. It's the difference between executing and doing research. So, for example, someone comes in and says, I need 100 grams of a product that was made before in a JMedChem paper. So all you have to do is execute on the published procedures. So the work in that case is basically equating to figuring out how much the cost of goods will be for that, for scaling up that protocol, see how scalable it will be, including labor costs and things like this, and then telling the client that it would cost this much to have 100 grams of this published compound. So that's how custom synthesis fee-for-service will generally work. On the other hand, if you have a client that says, I'm starting a new company and we're going to try and generate a bunch of new IP by combining these different warheads with these different cores, and I need some different batches that I can start feeding into other companies, other CROs that will give me kind of initial readouts on different cellular assays. And so in this case, then it could be that you have to develop the chemistry yourself, because maybe the compounds that the client is asking for has never been made before. Maybe it's impossible to make. But you have to issue a quote on the basis of a certain amount of time for research. It could be weeks or months. If it's complicated, it could be years. And you'll say, I would need this much time for an exploratory period, and then I would need this much time for execution. And then, you can issue quotes like this. On the other hand,
this is really cool, because I'd never really, as someone who's never really been on the inside of like a pharmaceutical company, like how I imagined it was like every single company has like, their target and they go for it. I never really thought about, no, you could like your company, you could be, you're head of the building blocks. So it's like, we need this, but actually we don't really have, like someone else could, like a third party will say like, actually we don't have time to like make this building block. Can you guys like basically source this for us?
Yeah.
Essentially, right? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. This is another kind of business line. So I mean, within contract research organizations, and to be clear, like Eurofins Villapharma is a CRO. It's not a pharmaceutical company, but
okay.
But that means that we're supporting pharmaceutical companies as well as other types of companies. For example, like agrochemical companies, fine chemical companies, or fragrances, or other things.
Right.
But there are companies.
So you're kind of like a middleman. Where it's like
you're kind of like a middleman. Yeah. I would say you're kind of the powerhouse that drives different industries forward. But this is interesting for a couple of reasons. One is that you get exposed to a lot of different chemistry, and you kind of secretly know what's going on behind the scenes at a lot of different places. And it's not that you're, like, for example, in a pharma company, you will know everything about your program. You'll know the biology of it. You'll know the supply chain of all your building blocks. But it'll basically just be that program, or maybe two, if you're managing two, or if you're participating in two, for example. But if you're in a CRO, then you're probably intricately tied to a bunch of different programs. And while you're not involved in the innovation or the biology necessarily, then you'll be really intimately integrated into the execution of a lot of different programs. So you're kind of learning a lot about a lot of different systems at once. So
I guess interesting question. I mean, I assume you gotta. I don't know if there's any NDA type stuff, but are there a couple examples where like whether it is like a whether it's an important agrochemical or a fragrance or even like a pharmaceutical drug that you were a part of, that eventually it made its way towards like the clinical trials and stuff like that. Is it something that I don't know people would know about, or in particular? Or?
I mean, being in a CRO, everything is very confidential. So
fair. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're not allowed people in CROs are not allowed to talk about like what clients they have. You cannot even say this is my client.
Fair.
Because even that would reveal certain parts of like the market infrastructure. So you could say like, oh, if it were revealed that this company is a CRO of them, then other CROs would know a bit who the competition is and would structure their quotes as such. I mean, some parts are obvious. Like there are certain CROs which are known within the industry to be servicing multiple high-level pharma companies, and if you're in the CRO industry, then you know who your competition is a bit, but you don't know all of it. So it's kind of an interesting game of like asymmetric information when you're generating quotes and trying to guess how much would this client place as value for this compound, for this delivery.
Yeah.
But this is just a bit the quoting game. There's another part of the CRO pharma relationship, which is the FTEs, which means the full-time equivalents. So rather than hire 100 employees, what a pharma will often do is hire 10 employees and 120 external employees, or 140 external employees, because the external employees are cheaper than the internal employees. So that means that they'll have a strong core. They would think of it perhaps as the brain behind the operations, and they'll have the hands that are executing the work somewhere else. But this means that they'll have a lot of people on permanent, I shouldn't say permanent, but let's say annual or monthly contracts in a CRO that are affiliated with a particular pharma. So it could be that on the given year, then a pharma says that I want to be investing this much in the FTEs, in the workers that I have in the CRO. And the people that I have internally, my senior scientists, my principal scientists of the big pharma, are going to be interacting and managing the work that's being done at the CRO to make sure that it's the work that I want to be done to advance the programs as quickly as possible. So that we can really take advantage of the fact that we have more workers than we would be able to afford if they were all internal. It can also be that CROs have sometimes more infrastructure than you would have at a big pharma. For example, it could be that a big pharma discovery group doesn't have the same resources that a CRO that's dedicated to doing route scouting and scale up would. A discovery group in a big pharma probably doesn't have a 25-liter reactor, but the scale up group that supports the discovery work happening in at a CRO would have this sort of capability.
Yeah. Something I always found interesting, and I mean, it makes sense, but like it is like the idea of like intellectual property being like a chemical. Like I always found that kind of interesting. That like, let's say you have a key building block that, and you can get a route that's like patented. Like I always found that kind of interesting. It makes sense, but it's just like I don't know. Again, I'm not really into it, so it's just kind of.
It's also something that I don't think so many people know the details of, because and this is why I really want to have someone that knows really the details of patent law and organic chemistry come on to the podcast that I run and explain this, because I've heard you can add a methyl group and then it's different. You can add a deuterium and then it becomes it's patent busting, or you can change a phenyl ring into a phenyl bioisosphere and then it's different. But I want to know the details about how this is actually played out in courts and know whether or not, what qualifies as different at the molecular level.
That would be an awesome podcast. I don't know if you have something going on in the works with that, but that would be.
I do have some. I do have someone that's coming. I hope. You never know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know a lot of the details about. What's required in order to. In order to
like be different enough from the patent, but it's like that is very, because it's just funny too, because a lot of people obviously like consumers who buy the stuff, have no, they may have no idea what's in these the chemicals that are in these things, but it really is it probably is such a technical area. Because also in the lawyers, they have to be like organic chemists, like they have to, right? I would assume they got to understand this kind of things. I wouldn't imagine like a lawyer to be able to parse through these kind of things unless you had a really strong background in organic chemistry.
Yeah, I don't know how they get the chemistry experience. I mean, the people that are in like the legal department of a top pharma, I don't think are chemists themselves, but they've had enough exposure that they know all the different. They know the differentiate. They know like what a diastereomer is, for example.
Right.
And they would know whether or not a diastereomer would qualify as a new molecular entity, for example, in the eyes of patent law. But,
I don't know. That's a good question, because you have to, because I know people that do consulting, like they get their PhD, they get their PhD, and then they do consulting for people, but you're not a lawyer though, so it's like you have to do law school and know stuff about organic chemistry. I think that's pretty incredible. So
it's a hard niche to fill, I think.
Yeah. So if you get that guess, I look forward to that episode. Then I think that would be super fascinating. Because you can definitely talk. You can kind of get into. Hopefully, you can get into the nitty gritty details.
It's interesting to think about from like the defensive perspective. Like, am I going to be able to cover this in my new patent? But there's also interesting from the offensive perspective. Like, okay, I'm someone who wants to still play in this therapeutic area and avoid infringing on someone else's patent. I mean, that this is a discussion that is happening in a lot of early discovery groups where they say, like, in the opening discussions that, like, the patents that we need to be aware of are this, and this is coming through the pipeline. So how do we avoid that? and then there are
Right.
discussions about like, unfortunately, I think that there are discussions in the pharmaceutical industry about which motifs will be biorelevant, but also avoid infringing on the patent. And
Yeah.
I don't know that it's always best for the patient that this is the way the discussion goes, but
Yeah.
it's a reality of the way it is, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah, it's just the reality of it. But yeah, so like you mentioned just a minute ago, so you are the founder of Synthesis Workshop, definitely an area that I think people are really excited to hear about now. I don't know if you want to like walk us through the inception of that channel, why you started it, and then we'll definitely talk about how it's going so far, because now it's really grown, but it definitely had humbling beginnings.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't know. Let you take the floor with it. With Synthesis Workshop.
Yeah, I mean, we started in, I think it was March 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic, and there were lockdowns that were coming in, and I was a postdoc at Oxford at this point, and I realized that you couldn't go to lab and do experiments, you couldn't make papers, you couldn't you couldn't get a lot of the traditional metrics that you would be wanting to have if you wanted to be advancing your career. And I realized that like if you think about it, there's so many different articles that are already published that we'll just never have the chance to go through. No one's going to go through Jack's 1965 January 1st issue 6. Like, no one's going to do that. No one's going to click through that unless by accident. And and the truth is that there are a lot of interesting articles that have already been published in that issue, probably. And and if you just go through there and read, if you have access, then you could probably be like, wow, I didn't know this. It's not that the typical graduate student would look through the 1960s issues of Jack's and being like, oh, I know this. No, it's all surprising still. It's all surprising because we haven't read it. And why is it that we haven't read it? It's not because we're too lazy. It's because there's not time enough. So somehow we do have to be able to kind of filter out all the important things that have happened so far, and to be able to condense the advances that have been done. And unfortunately, it's not just the 1960s we have to worry about, but it's exploding exponentially, the amount of information, the amount of reaction mechanisms and names and reagents that
it's a blessing and a curse. It's always moving, but there's never enough time to go through everything.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a bit the role of the science communicators now, is to being able to condense the advances that are coming out, and so that people inside and outside the community can be aware of what's going on. So this is a bit the motivation for Synthesis Workshop. And originally, then I just started by doing total synthesis and named reaction episodes, which I don't know if this is a really good if these were really good choices for initial topics, but pretty soon then we had one guest speaker, and we had another one after this. Originally we had Noam Saper and then Josh McManus, and we had many guest speakers after this, and they came from lots of different places around the world. And I realized that people like to listen to guest speakers more than they like to listen to me, which is good because it takes a lot of time to go through and make a 20-minute talk. Be by yourself. But if you say someone wants to give a 20-minute talk about this, that, and the other, then and all you have to do is edit it together, then it takes a lot of the workload off. So in the end, then having a lot of people involved and having a community-based podcast is really nice, because you get the voices of everyone, and because you get the topics and the subject matter knowledge of everyone, and also because it reduces the workload in the end.
I hear exactly what you're saying, because both of us, I guess, have been doing these podcasts for a while now. It's like, it's pretty incredible, like how explosive it's been, I guess. And also too, and you could definitely test this too. Like, if you go into YouTube or Spotify, there really isn't much for chemistry-based podcasts. This is something that I've talked about a lot. It's like there's a lot of physics and mathematics, right? Because statistics, they're fun to learn about. Or astrophysics, right? People just love hearing about that. And then obviously medicine and health, that's an easy buy-in for biology people. But there really isn't anything for chemistry, honestly. Honestly, I mean, I would love to, I don't know if you know more chemistry podcasts other than us two. I don't know if there's more. But
there are other ones, but it's hard to maintain, and it's hard to cover all the bases. For example, there are a couple good ones. Like Farm to Table is a very good one, and by Elsie Campo and Danny Schultz of Merck. That's a good one that connects the industry stories with organic chemistry. There's also Chem Convos. This is kind of an interview based one, and
I'll take a look at those then.
And there was a really good one, I think that was during the pandemic and maybe slightly before as well, called the Cyclo Edition.
I like that. Okay.
Yeah. We had some crossover in the topics that we were covering at some point. They had a really interesting way of conveying stuff with just pencil drawn mechanisms, but the way that they had the pencil drawn mechanisms and structures it made it seem that it was more like a group meeting, kind of an informal discussion that gave it a really nice feel. But it's hard to maintain a podcast in the long run. It's true. I mean, even my favorite podcasts that are sometimes like 500 episodes and then they shut down. It's hard to maintain. But this is why, in the case of Synthesis Workshop, we had the blessing that many people, including you, were willing to step up and help with the editorial work. Now we have this editorial board, and we also have editors that are doing problem sets, and we have a new website coming in a couple months.
It's an exciting time to be a part of this. Well, really, it's still an initiative. Really, I think it's excellent. I mean, kudos to you, Matt, because
Thanks.
it's over 150 episodes now. It's like it's only going to be getting bigger. It's super exciting time.
I hope so.
And it's
I realize that at some point. Go on.
I was just gonna say it's just like all from just. You're just like, screw it, I guess I'm going to start making these videos, really. I mean, I don't know. It probably wasn't as grandioso plan. It was really just like, some named reactions and some mechanisms from literature just kind of put up on the internet.
It started as like Reddit posts. I mean, we were really posting in like organic chemistry subreddits. But then, eventually then, it's surprising the amount of scope you can have when, especially so many people from different places are involved.
Right.
Because I think it means a lot that you have a lot of people from top labs that are willing to step up and give presentations, and these people are willing to put their names on your podcast and say, yeah, I'll give a presentation here, because maybe that person also gave a presentation at some other in some other forum that where it's possible that eventually that your podcast is kind of equated in a way with another forum. Another online presentation, for example. I was going to say, I don't know if you're able to kind of see the diagnostic, but something that I even noticed, like sometimes scrolling through like the YouTube comments is like, sometimes you get like high schoolers like in there learning about, like watching this stuff, and it's like, I think that's super cool because, I mean, I would have loved to have had something like this growing up in high school, like just kind of see this stuff and kind of watching it. It's formal and informal at the same time, where it's like super dense information, but it's not presented in an intense way, if that makes sense. So it strikes a nice balance between delivering the most important information, but it's not like having to defend this, or it's not like a dissertation type. You know what I mean? So it's funny because sometimes like when you see a paper then and it's published in JAX or it's published in Angevin or Nature Chemistry, then you see this. It's like a tight wall between the audience and the researchers presenting the work, because there's no room to ask questions, and you have the feeling that these people have really done their work and that there's no room for uncertainty. And then sometimes you see that when the person's presenting, you see that this is the person that did that, and you can ask them a question in YouTube comments. And it's surprising because, it breaks the wall a little bit between the community and the people doing making the publication. So it's something a bit useful.
Especially because it's more oftentimes than not, the discovery is usually serendipitous. Like sometimes like people will write it as if they had this grandiose plan, but it's like really. There's so much serendipity in chemistry. Obviously, like you have to have a hypothesis, but sometimes you just try things and they just work out, and then so it's like oftentimes it's really not that deep. Like we just tried this reaction and started going.
Yeah, it's true. And you see so much about the way that like organic chemists choose to tell the stories. It's almost always written in reverse now. That you have the story written, so that you have your main discovery of the paper, that you found the best catalyst, and then you tell it as if that was the plan all along. But this is not the case. But yeah,
especially with asymmetric stuff, asymmetric catalysts, like it really isn't like.
Sometimes this comes down to luck, and but yeah, yeah. In any case,
yeah. So, but just on synthesis workshop then. So now, we've been doing like named reactions, but also really, I would say the research spotlights are probably the most, those are that's kind of where the community really gets engaged.
Yeah.
But now we're doing an advanced organic courses. So that's kind of an initiative to kind of, I guess, really foundational chemistry, really, foundational organic chemistry.
Yeah.
And this is something that you've been working on for a long time. So I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about kind of the inspiration for like that area, but also, getting all your speakers. Like, I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about how that was organized.
Yeah, I mean, we are at the moment we are still releasing the Advanced Organic Chemistry course, and the idea for this is basically that with the research spotlight episodes on Synthesis Workshop, we're bouncing around from area to area every week to week. Sometimes it'll be nickel iridium, photoredox, decarboxylative, cross-coupling. Sometimes it'll be total synthesis of this. Sometimes it'll be some other topic. But this is not really a consistent storyline. And it also, I think, isn't necessarily the best way to ingest the community's knowledge. So I thought that within all the people that have presented so far, there's already like a huge amount of knowledge, and all that we've learned from them is the bit that they've researched. But the truth is that if we're able to kind of crystallize all of the knowledge from the different people in the community, then we can actually create something, a really useful resource, especially if it's polished in a way which is really palatable for young graduate students. In the same way that like Phil Barron's heterocycles course, or Curie Engel also has a course online. In the same way that these have become online resources for graduate students, I think that it's possible that you could have even graduate students or postdocs putting together the talks for an advanced organic chemistry course on different topics. And if you kind of divide the work, then it's possible that you could go deeply into each topic, and no one has to really go overboard with the workload, and you can still deliver something which is expansive and in-depth, but still feasible. And so this is what we are doing right now. Now we're, I think, 5 episodes in, and it'll be 20-something in the end. And yeah, we have a number of different modules, and now I think some of the people who had done talks in the past are now moved on to different positions in industry. So now I think there are people from like 5 different major companies involved. So yeah, we have their knowledge and experience to take advantage of, which also means that you don't just you're not just limited to topics from like an advanced organic chemistry textbook. It means that now we can learn about the practicalities of Ph.D. or about how would an organic chemistry grad student approach an introduction to medchem or an introduction to process chemistry. What are the main things that a process chemist would like to teach to a first-year organic chemistry grad student, so that they can frame their mindset a bit more as they go through their PhD, and they start to see what things are important for their reaction development milestones.
Right. I think that's super, super cool because it's super practical as well. Like, it's just like, at the end of the day, you're boiling down the most important concepts, I think. And you're hearing it right from people that are actually doing the stuff in the industry. So I think it's great. I also really enjoyed the retrosynthesis episode because I'm not really like a hardcore total synthesis type person. You know, I do organometallics and type chemistry. And so when I see total synthesis episodes or like papers, I'm like, how in the world do people like work backwards from this? And so I really appreciated that episode because I don't know, something like Taxol. It's like, how would someone actually work through this? Like, you know?
Yeah, it's really impressive. And the book that's referenced in that episode is, I think, such a difficult sometimes book to go through, the Quarry's Logic of Synthesis, that I have a copy of. But if I'm honest, like the first time I read that, I don't think it was nearly as tangible as the talk that Stephen Crossley gave. because I think it helps a lot to have someone actively going through the structures and talking through it, talking through the different lines of analysis and the way to disconnect molecules. And someone that can really bring Corey's book to life adds a lot of value, because otherwise I think the book sits on a shelf, and its concepts get a little bit lost. So I think it's pretty useful.
The art of it is kind of like something that needs to be like the art of it needs. It's good to see. It's like the art of it is finally like now people can kind of see it on the internet and really kind of. You can start to see the gears start to go for that type of work, because it really is. I mean, it's artistry, but also like you need to be, you need to think through these things. So it's great to see. So could you have imagined when you first started this in March 2020 to see where it goes now? I mean, this is an ever going type of initiative and project, but. I mean, could you have imagined it would have gotten to this point, March of 2020, or I don't know your thoughts on that, but.
No, I mean, absolutely no. I mean, I thought that the kind of top that we might be able to reach would be something like 70 to 100 people, because this is kind of what you see for like an average audience in real life watching an organic chemistry talk. And,
you're right.
If you look at other podcasts that are on YouTube, then sometimes this is where they end up reaching something between 30 to 50 or 100 people, and the people that are doing these podcasts don't complain. They keep pushing out episodes, and I think I would have done the same for a while. I don't know how long it would have lasted, but certainly once you get to the point where 1,000 people in the first day are tuning in to see an organic chemistry talk, it's like that's an impact.
That is certainly,
because I think that would be an impact, even if it wasn't just about organic chemistry.
Right.
Even if I was getting 1,000 views for someone cooking an apple pie, I mean, that would still be, for me, that would seem like a lot because it's just an apple pie. But if you have which it's not that easy, but okay. But I mean, I don't know. I don't think I know 1,000 organic chemists. So. If you think that there's that many people and are spending how many hundreds of hours every week just watching a new talk, it impresses me, because the amount of time that you have to invest is very insignificant in comparison to the amount of time that people end up spending on it, which is not true for all content that we create. It's specifically not true for journal articles, where the ratio is completely the opposite, and we spend many years to produce one, and sometimes the number of views of an article is quite small in comparison to the amount of hits that the YouTube video will get.
Right.
If I compare,
especially with those articles, you spend so long between the editorial process that people only end up reading like the abstract and conclusion anyway. So it's like at least most people, anyways. Like
it's true. If I think about the number of people that have read any or all the articles that I've written, it's nothing in comparison to the people that have watched the YouTube videos. And if I meet someone in person and they know me, it's because of YouTube videos. It's not because of any article I did. So I hope that's not a statement against the research I did, but it is a statement about the way that our world is now, that we're all very digitalized, and no one has time to go through all the articles now and attach the names to the research to the people. So, it seems that there's a bit of an extra onus, a bit of an extra effort that the authors have to put in to give their work that visibility. Sometimes in the past, that used to be done through authors getting like cover art or something, but that's not enough.
It's down there enough, but now, now they get a whole episode really dedicated to it. So it's just like it's really great to see. As we begin to wrap up here, the last thing I kind of wanted to ask you is, obviously, we have this advanced organic courses coming out. We talked about, especially in the future episodes, talking about, what does it actually look like to do high throughput screening or medchem, intro to medchem. But really, I don't know, what other things do you expect to see in the future for this workshop? Because I know, like, practically we have this advanced organic talks. We'll still have research spotlight episodes, but I don't know if you have other things in mind that you kind of want to see I want to go
as broad as possible. So, I mean, we started just with a very narrow category of content, and we expanded. And the next step now, recently we've expanded with the advanced organic chemistry course and problem sets and posters. Obviously,
Problem
the
sets have been
ultimate,
huge.
Yeah, the
I was
ultimate
doing
expansion
a
would
few of
be,
those. Those are great.
yeah, they've been really detailed, and I'm really blown away by the high quality that our editors are putting in. I think that the ultimate benchmark would be to see whether or not we can go beyond organic chemistry and have kind of sister podcasts or companion podcasts that would operate in inorganic chemistry or biochemistry or physical chemistry. And eventually, if you could just set a model that other people can follow and champion in their own way, then you're really having a very significant impact across multiple fields. There's one professor that was in contact with me about doing the same thing in inorganic chemistry, but I think eventually he realized that the workload would be too significant. But I hope that eventually we can show that there is a way to do this in a community-based way, so that it can be done in other fields. So that there can be other types of content as well. I mean, one of the shortcomings of the podcast has been in this. I've been in the culture of chemistry category, where we've tried to have some topics which are more about like having the career aspects or the human aspects of chemistry, but I haven't been able to develop this in the way that I had originally hoped. But I mean, your podcast is probing these kind of areas in a way that I wasn't able to. So I guess there will be other podcasts that cover this kind of category in a different way. But yeah, it's kind of
Yeah, I was gonna say it's hard to. I mean, everyone's a critic. Right? It's hard to do everything. I mean, if you're doing so much of the science, you'd love to talk about maybe like like you mentioned, the human aspect of it. But it's just hard to connect it all and to do all of it. But glad to be helpful, I guess, in that area, because. It definitely is a very important topic too. I think people get so caught up in the chemistry and trying to write papers and trying to get published and trying to go to conferences that it is important to remember, like, we are humans, taking care of yourself. That's a super important aspect. I think
for sure.
Really does get lost in the chemistry.
Yeah, it does.
But Matt, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It was it's been great. We were talking a little bit, very little beforehand, and first time that we had met in person. A lot of emails back and forth, but it was really, really fun talking with you today. And obviously, we're still gonna be working together through this workshop, and so we're those channels as strong as ever. So you look forward to keep doing that.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll stay in touch.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for another episode, and we'll see you in the next one.